With that, it's time to introduce our speaker for the day, Kirk Lewis with CarePatrol of Nebraska. Kirk, take it away.
Well, I've got to apologize up front. I had no idea that Krispy Kreme made little tiny donuts. Oh my gosh, and now I wish that I didn't know that Krispy Kreme makes little tiny donuts. Just so you'll know, they are back there, 90 calories a piece. At least that's what they're claiming. I don't really know. That's not one of them. And Graham, I have to apologize. I did not bring my Dr. Seuss book with me, so I will not be speaking in rhymes all day. My CarePatrol of Nebraska story is actually fairly short, so I'm actually going to share a Kirk Lewis life story. It will have success and failure, near-death experiences, miracles, inventions, all of that type of stuff. So I first want to start with how many of us in the room were alive in 1973? Okay, majority of us. How many people knew anybody who was a cancer survivor prior to 1973? Okay, see, now that number goes way, way down, right? So my dad was in the Air Force, so I grew up everywhere. And when he got stationed in Richard Sgebauer Air Force Base in Kansas City, Missouri in 1970. So as a youth, I was born in 1970. As a youth, I was active in sports, typical kid, football, baseball, those types of things. One of the regulations that the Air Force had to play in on-base sporting events was you had to have a physical exam in between each one of those sports. So we were coming out of football season, going into baseball season, and I had been not feeling very good at the time, was a little bit winded going up and down stairs, which my mom thought was kind of strange. She's like, "You're 10 years old, how are you getting winded going up and down stairs?" So during the physical exam, they decided to take some x-rays, found out some disturbing news, so they went to my mom and they said, "You probably should call your husband and tell him to meet you at the University of Kansas Medical Center. Then you need to put him in the car and drive there right now." So this was March of 1973. I had a biopsy, and then on March the 9th of 1973, my main doctor, Dr. Vats, V-A-T-T-S, from India, wore the turban and everything. This guy was totally wickedly cool. So he pulls my mom and dad into the room with me, and he says, "Your son has Ewing sarcoma." Now, Ewing sarcoma is bone cancer, primarily active in male adolescents between the age of 9 and 19. I was 10. So then he dismissed me after my first question as a 10-year-old is, "Okay, I got a baseball game next Saturday, can I play?" One thing I will tell you, cancer as an adolescent or as a young person is easier to handle mentally than it is as an adult, because you don't have all of those, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my wife, the kids," all those. You don't have any of that. You have, "I got a ball game next Saturday, can I play?" What do you know? I mean, I didn't know anybody that had cancer at the time. I didn't know how serious the C word was. So in a way, that's to an advantage. Many years later, I found out, and my mom sat me down one day and she said, "Do you have any idea how bad it was?" And I said, "Not a clue at all." She said, "Well, when you went back to your room and your dad and I stayed in the room, Dr. Vats looked at us and they said, 'You will be lucky if he's here 3 weeks from now.'" I had a softball-sized tumor on the front plate of my right hip. It had metastasized, filled up both lungs, why I couldn't go up and down stairs without getting out of breath, all through the abdomen. You know, you talk about stages of cancer. This was as high as it gets. There's stage 5, and then there's almost dead. That's where I was. Fortunately, I have a body that reacts extremely well to medications. I metabolize medications very well, even to this day. If I get a cold and take cold medications, it goes away. I'm lucky. I just have that particular type. So they started aggressive chemotherapy. And the reason why they started aggressive chemotherapy is the typical remedy for Ewing sarcoma is amputation. But my primary tumor was right on the front of my hip. They couldn't amputate it. They'd never seen a case like that in Kansas City. So they called the guys down at MD Anderson, and the guys at MD Anderson said, we've never seen anything like that either. So he's dead anyway, try this. At that time, they had a really good grasp on leukemia and the medication that it took for media, but they did not have a good solid tumor protocol. So they said, well, he's probably dead anyway, so let's try something crazy out of the box, do whatever. Lo and behold, I reacted really well. I ended up with 27 different rounds of chemotherapy, and the treatment for chemotherapy back then, you know, nowadays, if you have chemotherapy, you typically go to a medication administrator every Friday at 2, and you lay in this chair and all that type of stuff. When I was doing it, let's admit you on Sunday night, let's start chemo Monday morning, let's do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, until you are almost dead, and send you home so your body can recuperate, and 4 weeks later, we're gonna do it again. I did that 27 times. I had radiation to both lungs, had radiation to the primary tumor. To this day, the only side effect of that is my right leg is about that much shorter than my left one. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna walk with a limp or be dead. I think I'll take the walk with the limp thing. So that's the miraculous portion. That's the near-death experience part of it. So now we'll go to some of the successes and failures. So I ended up getting a degree from Missouri State University in television production. So I can make TV or movies or whatever. Spent 7 years directing the 6 and 10 o'clock news. Super high pressure. That's a 30-minute live show, in case anybody didn't know that. And you're sitting down and anything can happen in a live show. Once I had a weather guy, had an anxiety attack, walked right off the stage, walked out of the building. And I don't know, here's a little secret. Little insider information. Generally, when the weather guy's on, the news anchors get up and go out and have a drink of coffee or water or whatever it is. So here this weather guy walks off the stage, and I don't have an anchor to go to because they're gone. Studio's empty, completely empty. And Master Control, who handles running commercials and all that, they didn't have one queued up because it was weather, and they didn't need to go to a commercial. So we sat there with dead space, absolutely nothing happening for almost 3 minutes on a live TV show. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. But that was an evening job. So I had a friend from church who ran a store fixturing business, and we helped people, if you wanted to open a clothing boutique or whatever it was. We would come in and we would help you with your fixtures, your clothing racks, your four-ways, your cash register counters, your cash registers, your shopping bags, all of those things. And I found out that I really loved that business and the sales part of that because I grew up in a household where both of my parents were engineers, and figure it out was the mantra at my house. It was a great environment for my brother and I to grow up in because my dad would say, here's point A, here's point B. I want you to get from point A to point B. I don't care how you do it. Now, my dad was a mechanical engineer. My mom was electrical. And so we would go from point A to point B, and I was usually kind of like, woohoo, and I'd get to point B. Well, the great thing was then he would review all those. Here's point A, here's point B. His was always this. He was a straight line guy because he was mechanical. So I grew up left and right brained, because my mom was highly creative and my dad was super linear. So I grew up in that environment, and to this day I am highly creative and highly organized simultaneously. I don't know how, but I am. And so I found out that I really loved that industry. And so in 1993, I invented this for Walmart stores. And if you go into Walmart today, you will see one of these on the front of every one of their shelves. They are still using this today. So I looked at their situation and how they labeled things in their stores. And early on in Walmart's history, they would take an adhesive label and they would stick it to the front of their shelf. Their shelves are different than anybody else's in the industry. They're the only ones that do a shelf like theirs. Most shelves have a C in it. Theirs is flat. So they had to stick things on the front of it. But then it would come time to do a pricing change at Walmart, and let's say they're doing deodorant, for instance, where they have 24 linear feet of deodorant and they're all this wide. So there's like 9,000. Have been to Walmart and bought deodorant? There's like 9,000 of them. It's crazy, the number that they have. So that would take them about 4 or 5 days to peel all those things off, generate new ones, clean off the shelf, all those types of things. So I invented this little thing here, and has a little adhesive on the back of it, stick it to the front of their shelf, and it actually opens up, and they can put a paper ticket in there. Pull out the paper, put a new one in, poof. We took them from 4 days to 8 hours to change their deodorant sets. So then I spent, almost 30 years in that industry of figuring out how retailers work and how to best serve those needs. And in the process of that, I have 9 United States and international patents. Interestingly enough, this one, the very first one, is the only one I have that is not valid in the United States. I don't know why. And the reason being is that the company I was working for when I did this, we already had a product that had this little tiny bar on the back of it that would help them scan. So they had like a little pen scanner, and it would help them run across the barcode, little thing on the back of it. Now, we used in this particular one, this bar was designed to make sure that it didn't ride up on the shelf. So when you were installing it, it was the guide that helped. So it was a completely different reason for that little bar, but the patent office said, you already have one that's got that little bar on it, so we can't do that again. But this one's actually patented worldwide other than the United States. So strangely enough. But I brought some of them with me. If you go to Walmart today, this one is actually the product that's in there. And so what we found was that one with the tape on it. They have what's called a surfactant. When they paint those shelves, they powder coat them, and the surfactant actually rises up, and it has a slight oil on it so that they can glide products off and on the shelf real easily. Well, tape and oil don't work very well. So Walmart was having to rough up the front of the shelf before they put that thing on there. And even though it ended up saving them time in the long run, they didn't like that process. So we snapped it on instead of taping it on. So this is the one that they actually are still using. So I did this one twice. This one they allowed a patent in the United States, so I thought that was pretty good. So I did that for a long period of time. And then about 6 years ago or so, I'm in a church service, and well, multiple church services, because our pastor was doing a series study on generosity. And through this generosity sermon series, the recurring question kept being, are you making a difference? And so I soul searched that a little bit, and I said, well, I'm making a living, and I'm pretty darn good at what I do, but I'm not making a difference. Doesn't make a difference at all. This does not help humanity at all. Helps Walmart, helped me financially, but doesn't help humanity. So it really doesn't make a difference. It's how many of these things do you want and when do you want them? That was my sales career. So I said, all right, I'm open to something new. Why not? And at that point then, I found a job with Holiday Retirement Company. Holiday Retirement runs Brentwood Estates here in town. So I moved into that community, not moved in, but moved to that community as their sales liaison. So my responsibility was to fill that building. Well, that building is an independent living building only. So although I was making a difference, I wasn't making a difference for people that needed services or that needed memory care. And so about 9 months ago, I transitioned to a company called CarePatrol of Nebraska. Now, I'm not your traditional entrepreneur. I have owned a music business. My wife and I owned a music business. And we did that for about 18 months until the retail environment killed us because it was 6 days a week. But my wife is a classically trained concert pianist, and she was also our church accompanist. So we were working 7 days a week, technically. And we did that for 18 months and finally said, you know what, there's got to be something better than that. Now, that was in Bentonville, Arkansas, which happens to be the world headquarters of Walmart. And lo and behold, this took me to the world headquarters of Walmart. So I did live in Bentonville. And when we first got there, my wife was really struggling with, I can't find adequate piano music here because it's small town America. Bentonville has about 39,000 people. So we decided to open our own music store. Sold pianos and all that stuff. We had 95 students that she was teaching. Got kind of crazy. So we gave that up, moved to Lincoln because my daughter came up here to go to college, fell in love with a Cornhusker, started having babies, and I'm like, I don't know, Bentonville's 7 hours away. I'd rather be the grandpa that's close and can kind of hang around with the kids, all that stuff. So I went from 1 to 4 in about 6 years. Yeah, once they figured out how to do that, they got pretty good at it, I guess. I don't know, but 4 kids in 6 years is, wow. Whew. Yeah, so, and so back to my story out of Brentwood. That was a little aside there. Chased a rabbit, I'm sorry. Rabbit chasing is probably not the best thing to do. So I'm there and I'm like, okay, yes, I'm helping, I'm making a difference, but I'm not sure I'm making enough of a difference. So what CarePatrol of Nebraska does, we are a senior placement agency. And what we do is when families and individuals get to a point where mom or dad can no longer live in their home safely, and they may need assistance helping find a place to go. They contact us, and we go through a process with them, what's called a discovery process. And so we'll ask a bunch of questions, more questions than they really need to know, right? So because what we need to find out is, what are their wants? What are their needs? What are their desires? What is their budget? What do they like? What do they dislike? All those types of things. Because we have 36 communities in this city, 36 of them. That's a big, huge pie to try and whittle down. So we have an intimate relationship and an intimate knowledge of all of those communities within the area. So they can come to us and say, based on this, 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 and this, here's 3 that are going to fit your needs the best. So we help them navigate that process of finding the best fit for them based on needs, wants, desires, budgets. But the great thing for me is that I don't have to pigeonhole myself to an independent living community only. I have 36 of them at my disposal. So if their primary need is memory care, I can actually help them get there. I couldn't help them when I was at Brentwood, but now I can. Or if they just need medication management and a bath aid 3 times a week, I can find the right spot for them. If they only have $3,500 a month as opposed to $9,000 a month, I can find them a $3,500. I could also find them a $9,000, but maybe the $9,000 doesn't work. I mean, we've had many times when someone will come in and they'll say, yeah, well, Dad's got all the money in the world, but he grew up on a farm. Well, okay, he probably doesn't like chandeliers and grand pianos and all that stuff. He grew up on a farm. So even though he could afford $9,000, He wants to live in $3,000. So even though he can afford it, the best fit for him is $3,000. So we have the ability to tailor our presentations and tailor our touring and all of that to exactly the needs that they need. We're a little bit like a real estate agent. When you go to buy a house, they don't show you all of the houses on the market, right? They show you the 3 or 4 that are best fit for you. We do the same exact thing, although our house happens to have 140 rooms in it instead of just 1. So that's pretty much my life story in a nutshell and what we do at CarePatrol of Nebraska. Questions? Well, there's got to be questions. I own 71 bow ties, in case that's a question. Just in case that was going to come out, I'll just do that one, 71. Yes?
I think one of the things that you missed on is, as somebody who would be looking for placement, what do you charge them for that service?
We charge them absolutely nothing for that service. We get paid from the community that they move into. So it's kind of like a real estate agent. You know, you don't pay a real estate agent until you buy the house. So they don't pay us ever, but we do make our money on the community that they move into. We have contracts with almost everybody in town.
So there are other services that do what you do as well.
Yes.
Are your commissions different?
No, we pretty much, well, everybody negotiates with their community a certain percentage of that. So there may be a small variant, but very little variation between everybody. Usually that finder's fee ranges anywhere from 50 to 80% of the cost of 1 month, and that's rent and care. Yes?
Do you primarily then work to place people in new homes or coordinate to bring care to them in their current home?
We can coordinate to bring care to them in their new home as well. That's what makes us a little bit different than, there's about 3 companies in Lincoln that do what we do. Bridge to Better Living, who used to be here, is one of them. Oasis Senior Living is one, and CarePatrol. We're a little bit different. We have a food program that's like Meals on Wheels on steroids. Because Meals on Wheels, if anybody's familiar with that, Meals on Wheels comes to your house once a day. They'll bring that to you. It's about $6 a day, roughly, to have Meals on Wheels. But if you're not home, you don't get your meal that day. Or you don't get to pick what you want that day. They're going to bring you meatloaf, and if you hate meatloaf, then you're probably not going to want it that day. Our meal program is through a company in, I think it's called Mom Eats in Iowa, and you order everything online. It's delivered to your house via FedEx in a styrofoam cooler, so you don't even have to be there. Then you can put those in your refrigerator. You can keep 7, 14, 21 days worth of meals. They're microwavable. You get to go on, pick and choose from the website which meals you want. If you have dietary restrictions like low sodium, you click the low sodium and everything that's high sodium falls off the menu. Then you can pick all the things that are healthy for you. So it's a little bit different because it's Meals on Wheels, yeah, because you're getting a meal every day, but you're getting what you want and when you want it, and you get to pick and choose. And ours averages about $6.80 a day, so 80 cents for choice. That's not so bad. Yes?
So I have a question, more of a curiosity more than anything. When you find someone who needs placement, is the family usually either on counseling or anything for the transition? I guess I have a friend who is looking to place their parent, but it's emotionally hard for him to do so. So just as a curiosity, have you found or have seen that there's counseling needed for the family when they're doing transitions, or even the person who's being moved?
Occasionally. Typically, the emotional trauma is handled within the family. because I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that this is an easy decision at all. It's probably one of the top 3 decisions that any family will ever have to make. Who you're going to marry is one of them. Where you're going to put mom and dad is one of them. It's not easy. It's very difficult. And it is. I tell people that I deal with the best and worst of humanity maybe on a daily basis, because occasionally you get those families where you can tell that they're tight-knit and everything's going to work, and then occasionally you get that family where, well, we don't want to move mom over there because she's going to spend our money. And I go, it's not your money. It's mom's money or dad's money. They're the ones who worked all of their lives to put it away. You're not entitled to it. So that's the worst of humanity, when you get families involved that come in and say, well, we don't care about mom's safety or dad's security or what it is over there, because we want that nest egg that they've got. We want the house. And I'm like, sell the house, use that $180,000 that you get from the house to take care of your mom. And they don't get it. So it is difficult, yeah. And they can sometimes seek counseling. Generally, what we find is, for the parent, the one that ends up moving into the community, it's a struggle for them until about 2 months in, and then they cross this little bridge and a switch goes on, and they go, this is a pretty cool place to live, and I wish I'd have done it sooner. So if they can get past that first 2-month window, that little portion that's in there, generally it gets really good from there, because then the kids start seeing progress, and then the kids get emotionally let down. They go, oh, great, look how good mom's doing. So yeah. Yes?
Do you only service within the city, or do you service outside of the city?
We are CarePatrol of Nebraska.
Okay.
So we own the franchise for Lincoln and Omaha. So we do both of those cities, and combined in those, that's 105 communities between the 2 cities. But we will go elsewhere in the state. The trick being, the farther you get from Lincoln and Omaha, the choices in those smaller cities are diminished. So do they really need our assistance when there's only 3 communities to look at? I mean, that's what we're going to take them to. We'd probably take them to 3. They really need our help? Probably not. Here they do. Omaha certainly, but not necessarily in the smaller towns, just because the choices are so narrow anyway that they pretty much know where it's like, well, we can go here or here, and that's it.
But what about your meal programs?
Meal program can be anywhere,
Okay.
because it's FedEx delivered, so that'll go anywhere across the U.S.
Is CarePatrol, the franchise, is that available across the country? Or?
It is. CarePatrol franchise has been going for 26 years, founded by a pair of social workers out of Arizona. And so our philosophy as a company is a little bit different than some of the others, because we have a philosophy of social work on down. So our mission is safety first, always. So we want to make sure that that parent or loved one is safe. And a lot of times in their home, they can't be either socially, or there may be stairs in the house, and the last thing you want is mom going up and down the stairs to do laundry and having a trip and fall. Stairs are the #1 reason why people come to us. Pets are the #2, because you trip on your pets a lot. And so, yeah.
Again, back to the franchise, what kind of services do you guys get provided through your franchise?
Yeah, we get a national marketing program. We get a lead retrieval CRM system that helps us, and the costs for those are fairly minimal. We have 170 franchises currently across the United States. So we're the largest by far. It's not even, I know Bridge is now doing some franchising and all that stuff, but they're not near at 170. So we're covered 170 cities, which makes it really kind of neat, because we can share. Like, maybe we'll get someone whose parent lives in California, but they live here. And so we can work with a CarePatrol California liaison to say, hey, when you get there, hook up with these guys, or we can do the same thing. Well, my mom doesn't want to live in the cold anymore. She wants to move to Texas. Okay, well, we'll move you to Texas, not a problem, because we got a CarePatrol franchise down there.
I have a question on patents. Are they hard to get, and are they costly? Is it a costly process?
And mine is on piggybacking on that. So what's the first step? You come up with this brilliant idea, you want to get a patent, what next?
Okay, so tandem. If you have a great idea and you come up with the idea, you have to first find a good patent attorney. It's got to start with the patent attorney, because it can take a long time. It is an extremely difficult process because the vetting process through the government is very, very complicated. So the best patents, this is a strange thing, the best patents, the language of the patent should be specifically vague. You have an idea and you have something that's going to do this specific thing. How vaguely can we language that? Because how you get around patents? You do something to it that's not claimed in the patent. Like this is one of mine. So it snaps into a retail channel, and you put a sign card in here and you snap this on here, and it holds the sign out like this way, so when you're walking down the aisle, it sticks at you, right? There's a company called Fasteners for Retail, owns a patent on one of these that has, when this little poker goes through, the shoulder of the poker rests in this hole. So I did the same thing, except my poker doesn't have a shoulder at all. I'm still poking the sign, but mine snaps on back here. So I do the same concept, but they did not work around this portion. If I'd have done an expansion joint, when you push this thing into an expansion that's not using a shoulder, that would also get around the patent. So you have to be specifically vague. We want it to do this. Now, how can we write some language that no one can get around it? And that's where the really good patent attorney comes in. So they are generally expensive. In the United States, there are generally two types in this type of industry. You can get a design patent. This particular thing, when you go to Walmart, you see the little clip strips, little impulse things hanging off of one of these. So this was actually a design patent, because this looks like nothing else that had been out there before. Or you get a utility patent. So not how it looks, but how it works. Now the works ones are the really good ones. You want utility patents. I have 8 utility patents and 1 design patent. And those last for a period of duration of 17 years. So actually almost every one of my patents has now expired, except I think this one's still valid, maybe. That was probably 2008. So I'm 12 years into that one, thereabouts. So, yes, sir.
So when you were doing these patents, were you employed by Walmart at the time?
No, I was actually employed by a Walmart supplier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they helped you maybe with the cost of the attorneys, or does that all come out of pocket?
No, actually, I am an assignee for all of, I don't own any of the patents, because my contracts with those companies that I was working for are, hey, you work for us, if you come up with an idea, we're gonna own it, but we're gonna assign it to you. So they're mine, but I didn't get any.
Not get any royalties?
No, but I was in sales, so I got royalties from the sale of the product. Yeah, so I was paid for them and paid for the intellectual process of coming up with them, just because of the increase in sales.
I'm going to go back to the human side for a
Yes.
minute. I'm also a twice survivor.
Yeah.
As a 10-year-old, or 11-year-old, you went through that. Do you think your attitude, I'm a firm believer that a lot of overcoming cancer is attitude. That your brain also, and now I know it's there, but your attitude, how you want to deal with it, has a big impact on your power.
It does.
And So as a 10-year-old, how did you, other than the pain and but how was your positive, how did you manage your positive side of it?
I have always been an optimist. I am a glass is always full, and whether it's got stuff in it or not, it's always full for me. I'm like, it's either got half water and half air, or 3/4 of air, and I don't know. So that's just part of me and my personality. I was only fearful one time. One thing that chemotherapy does is it really attacks your platelets. And so my platelet count was really, really, really way, way low. And I got a nosebleed that would not stop. Bled for 11 days. And with stuff up, 3 feet worth of little medicated stuff that they cram up there with a thing. That was October of 1974. I was 11 years old at that point. When I was dismissed from the hospital, I weighed 49 pounds. That was a bad one. Yeah. But that was the only time that I was ever somewhat afraid. Never missed a grade of school. My mom would go to the school every day and bring me my homework, and I would do it. And my mom was a saint through that whole thing. When my son turned 10 years old is when I had the come to Jesus meeting. Because it was like, okay, so if a doctor were to sit me down right now, my son was the second child, I was the second child. So if a doctor came and sat me down right now and said, your son has cancer. So that put a perspective on, wow, my parents were a rock because they never, ever showed any fear, anything negative in front of me. Now, I'm sure when they got home, when they got behind those bedroom doors, that there was a lot of tears and all that stuff going on.
If the engineer linear was a plus.
Yes, it was for him. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And nice story, heartwarming story. My mom had a massive stroke in 2007. And I went to visit her in the hospital, and she's laying there, and she was still pretty good, because it was real early after the stroke, and she could communicate somewhat with that. And I crawled up in the bed and lay down next to her, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Hey, I'm just paying you back for all those times you did this for me." And she looked at me and she said, "That's a fair trade." It's the last thing she ever said to me. Oh. So I'm like, yes. That's pretty cool.
Kirk, we really appreciate your story.
Oh, look, I almost did an hour. I was close.
I want to present you with a Focus Suite mug as a thank you. So thank you for being here today. I'm sure you're going to hang around for a while.
Yep.
So if you have questions for Kirk or about CarePatrol, please come up and visit with him one-on-one.
Check out the patent plaques and things like that.
Yeah.
They're kind of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If you're not getting our newsletter and you want to get our newsletter, please see me afterwards, and we'll swap business cards. But if not, we'll see you next week. Thanks for being here.